It all started with a letter. A letter that no one outside the highest corridors of the palace was supposed to see. But somehow, it found its way into Meghan Markle's hands. And in an instant, everything she thought she knew about her life, her family, and her child was thrown into chaos. Imagine the moment you are told that someone you've loved, nurtured, believed in, might never have existed in the way you imagined. That is the moment Meghan Markle faced. A revelation so staggering, so unfathomable, that it could shake the very foundations of the British monarchy. You might be asking yourself right now, how could this be possible? How could a royal family, with all its protocols, secrecy, and centuries of tradition, allow a question about an heir's very existence to surface? And more importantly, what does this mean for Archie, Meghan's son, and his place in the line of succession? But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. In the first 5 seconds, Meghan's world unraveled. She had been carefully curated, protected by advisors, and shielded by her own fame. But suddenly, the armor cracked. Reports had been circulating quietly within palace walls, whispers among the staff, hushed conversations in hallways, and secret memos marked top confidential. The initial shock wasn't just about the claim itself, it was about the audacity. The audacity of suggesting that her child, her firstborn, might not belong in the royal lineage. And the source of this revelation? None other than King Charles himself. Now, before you rush to judgment, think about this. What would you do if the head of your family, the very person whose approval and authority shaped your life, made a decision that could erase your child from history? Imagine the callousness, the cold precision of a ruling that could alter not only the present but generations to come. Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, found herself in that unimaginable position. The letter spelled out the unthinkable. King Charles had made a decision that would remove Archie from the line of succession forever. No exceptions, no appeals, just a final, irrevocable decree. You might wonder, how could such a thing happen? How could the king justify such a move, especially against his own grandson? The answer lies somewhere between palace politics, long-brewing tensions, and a reality stranger than fiction. The monarchy has always been about appearances, tradition, and control, but what happens when those pillars are challenged by a revelation too explosive to ignore? Meghan knew, in that moment, that her next moves would not just be about defending her child. They would be about protecting her own legacy, her reputation, and her very existence in a system that had already proven it could be ruthless. Let's take a step back for context. Meghan Markle had always been scrutinized, even before her marriage into the royal family. From her American upbringing to her career in Hollywood, she had navigated a world of cameras, critics, and constant public evaluation. But nothing could have prepared her for the labyrinthine intrigue of the royal household. From day one, she was under the microscope. Every gesture, every outfit, every word was analyzed, dissected, and sometimes weaponized against her. And now, this letter, this decree from King Charles, represented a level of scrutiny and judgment unlike anything she had faced before. It was personal, it was political, and it was devastating. The timing of the revelation made it even more dramatic. Meghan was in Los Angeles, surrounded by the comforts of her life post-Megxit, yet she felt the cold grip of the monarchy closing in from thousands of miles away. The news had traveled swiftly through channels meant to be discreet, leaking into social media, gossip columns, and global news outlets before Meghan could even process it herself. Her private world collided with the public one in a torrent of judgment, speculation, and outrage. Could the monarchy really have gone this far? Was Archie's entire existence being questioned? And if so, what did this mean for the perception of Meghan Markle herself, her family, and the very idea of royal succession? But the story doesn't stop there. It gets darker, more complicated, and infinitely more dramatic. Because behind closed doors, the palace had been maneuvering for months. Conversations between King Charles and senior advisors hinted at long-standing concerns, strategic considerations, and a determination to control the narrative. Meghan, meanwhile, had been unaware of these discussions. She trusted that her child's position, her child's future, was secure. And then, in one moment, that trust was obliterated. Consider the emotional impact for a second. Meghan Markle, A woman who had faced relentless media scrutiny and invasive public attention suddenly confronted a reality where her child's legitimacy and status were under attack. She felt cornered, exposed, and betrayed. How do you defend against a system so entrenched in tradition that questioning it is almost forbidden? How do you respond when the very head of your family makes a move that could erase your child from history, not just metaphorically, but legally? The stakes were immense, and the implications were global. And here's where it gets even more intriguing. Early reports suggested that this wasn't just a decision made in isolation. There were hints of internal palace documents, leaked memos, and whispers among advisors suggesting that Meghan had been under surveillance, that her every move had been documented, and that the palace had been strategizing a preemptive strike against her. Was this about Archie? Or was Archie merely a pawn in a larger game? These questions set the stage for a confrontation that would challenge every assumption about power, loyalty, and control within the monarchy. Now, you might be asking yourself, where is Prince Harry in all of this? What was his role as Meghan's husband and Archie's father? Could he intervene? Was he even aware of the full extent of King Charles's decision? The answers are as dramatic as they are complicated. Harry found himself torn between his loyalty to the monarchy, his devotion to his father, and his unyielding commitment to Meghan and their children. The tension between personal loyalty and royal duty would become one of the most critical emotional threads in this saga, and it would test every bond, every relationship, and every alliance within the royal family. And the timing couldn't have been worse. Social media was ablaze with speculation, analysts were dissecting every known fact, and the global audience was desperate for answers. Meghan's every public appearance, interview, and post became fodder for debate. Every gesture, every word, every expression was scrutinized under the harsh glare of public attention. The world was watching as one of the most intimate and explosive family decisions in royal history unfolded. Here's a question for you. If you were in Meghan's position, how would you respond? Would you fight back publicly, risking further scrutiny and criticism? Or would you attempt a quiet, strategic response behind closed doors, hoping to navigate the treacherous waters of palace politics without attracting more attention? Meghan's choices in the coming days would define not just her relationship with the monarchy, but her entire legacy, her child's future, and her place in history. And then, just as the tension reached its peak, a shocking development occurred. Insiders reported that King Charles's decision to remove Archie from the line of succession wasn't just about legal or procedural concerns. There were rumors of deeper, more personal motivations. Could it be that the king had been influenced by external pressures, by advisors with their own agendas, or by long-standing family rivalries? Or was this a calculated move to assert control and send a message to Meghan Markle, who had challenged tradition, broken precedent, and demanded her own space within the royal hierarchy? The implications were staggering. By now, you can probably feel the tension, the drama, and the emotional stakes of this story. It's a tale of power, betrayal, love, and family, set against the backdrop of one of the most watched and scrutinized institutions in the world. Every decision, every leak, every revelation carries enormous consequences, and the twists, the surprises, and the shockwaves are only just beginning. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Meghan Markle, facing the ultimate challenge, had to make a choice: submit to the monarchy's decree or take bold action to protect her child and her own legacy. The world was watching, the media was waiting, and history hung in the balance. And as you're about to discover, the story that unfolded was more dramatic, more emotional, and more shocking than anything anyone could have anticipated. It began with whispers. Soft, almost imperceptible murmurs circulating through the palace corridors. Staff members exchanged nervous glances, hurriedly folded letters changed hands, and a tension hung in the air that even the gilded halls of Buckingham Palace could not mask. But these whispers were different. They weren't about Meghan's wardrobe choices, her public statements, or even her relationship with Prince Harry. No, these were far more explosive. These were whispers that questioned the very existence of her son, Archie. Can you imagine hearing that about your own child? Can you even begin to fathom the disbelief, the horror, the sense of betrayal? That is exactly the reality Meghan Markle confronted. The rumors suggested something unthinkable. that Archie, the boy the world had been told was a rightful heir in the line of succession, might not actually exist as a legitimate member of the royal lineage. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just about reputation. It was about legacy, inheritance, and the very essence of what the monarchy had stood for over centuries. The first shock came when a confidential document, marked top secret, reached Meghan's inner circle. It was a memorandum detailing conversations that had allegedly taken place between King Charles and senior advisors. The document hinted that Archie's paternity had been questioned long before the public ever knew of him. Some passages were deliberately vague, designed to be interpretable in multiple ways, but the insinuation was unmistakable. Someone in power was suggesting that Archie might not belong in the royal succession line at all. Now, let's pause for a moment and ask yourself, how would you respond if you received information like this? Would you panic? Rage? Deny it outright? Meghan, at that exact moment, felt every single one of those emotions simultaneously. Her world, carefully curated over years of public appearances and media strategy, was suddenly exposed to one of the most damaging rumors imaginable. And it didn't stop there. The document hinted that King Charles himself had been involved in the initial deliberations, raising questions about the motivations behind these claims. Was it a protective measure for the monarchy, a strategic maneuver to assert control, or a deeply personal decision meant to send a message to Meghan and Harry? It's important to understand the context here. Meghan Markle had never been a stranger to scrutiny. From her early acting career to her global humanitarian work, she was accustomed to the public eye. But this was different. This was not about image or reputation. It was about existence, legitimacy, and history. For centuries, the royal family had operated under strict rules of succession. Every birth, every marriage, every child's status was recorded, observed, and verified. Yet here was a scenario where the very existence of a royal heir, one already publicly acknowledged, was being called into question. The palace had always been an intricate web of secrecy, tradition, and power plays. But even by those standards, this revelation was extraordinary. Staff members who had been sworn to discretion were now leaking bits and pieces of information. Allegedly, the inner circle of senior advisors had been debating this issue for months, carefully weighing the pros and cons of either confirming Archie's status or quietly removing him from the succession line. Some argued that keeping him in the line could lead to public scandal if questions arose later. Others feared that removing him would spark an unprecedented backlash. The stakes were colossal, and the decisions were being made far away from Meghan's eyes, in rooms she could not enter. And then, there were the leaks to the media. The British tabloids, ever eager for a story, were suddenly abuzz with speculation. Headlines hinted at royal family turmoil, heir controversy, and mystery surrounding Archie. Social media erupted. Memes, videos, and posts flooded Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Suddenly, a private matter of family and lineage had become a public spectacle, dissected by millions across the globe. For Meghan, this was more than stressful, it was deeply personal. She was being scrutinized, her parenting questioned, and her child's legitimacy debated on platforms that offered no nuance, only outrage. Now, imagine being in her shoes. Imagine sitting at a dining table in your Los Angeles home, sipping your morning coffee, only to receive a private message from a royal insider indicating that your child's existence might be under attack by the very family you trusted. How do you even process that? The emotional weight is staggering. Meghan reportedly felt betrayed, humiliated, and enraged all at once. Every instinct screamed to fight back, to protect her child, to reclaim the narrative. But the machinery of the monarchy is complex, disciplined, and notoriously slow-moving. Meghan knew that any rash reaction could be used against her. Prince Harry, for his part, was caught in a dilemma of unimaginable proportions. Torn between loyalty to his father, duty to the monarchy, and unwavering support for Meghan and Archie, Harry faced one of the most personal and painful conflicts of his life. Reports suggest that he spent hours pacing in private rooms, on confidential calls, and weighing every possible response. Every advisor he consulted had an opinion, and each opinion carried potential consequences. Should they confront the king directly? Should they go public? Should they gather evidence first? Each choice carried enormous risk. It's also crucial to understand the psychological dimension. The palace operates in a culture of hierarchy, loyalty, and secrecy. Breaking protocol or challenging a royal decree can have far-reaching implications. Meghan's experience in Hollywood, where assertiveness and visibility are often rewarded, collided violently with the expectations of the royal household, where discretion and compliance are paramount. The tension between these two worlds added an additional layer of stress and complexity to an already explosive situation. Now, here's something most people outside the palace may not consider: the role of intermediaries and messengers. In situations like this, news rarely travels directly. It's filtered through multiple layers of staff, legal advisors, and communication specialists. Each layer can distort, exaggerate, or reinterpret the message. For Meghan, this meant that the initial revelation about Archie's status came not as a clear, factual statement, but as a cascade of hints, insinuations, and carefully worded suggestions. The uncertainty itself was a weapon. It forced Meghan and Harry into a state of constant vigilance, questioning every action, every word, and every piece of information. And the public dimension only magnified the stakes. Royal experts, commentators, and journalists were speculating on every potential outcome. What if Archie is removed? One headline asked. Could Meghan be sidelined? Another demanded. The internet thrives on uncertainty, and in this case, the uncertainty was orchestrated, deliberate, and devastating. For Meghan, controlling the narrative was not just a matter of reputation. It was a matter of survival, both personal and familial. As the days passed, tensions escalated. Secret meetings were reportedly held in London and Los Angeles. Legal advisors debated options, from quiet negotiations to public statements. Some insiders suggested that a legal battle might be inevitable, while others warned that escalating the conflict could result in permanent damage to Meghan's relationship with the royal family. The pressure was relentless. Every move, every decision, and every statement had to be calculated with extreme precision. But perhaps the most alarming aspect of this situation was the psychological toll. Meghan reportedly spent nights awake, reviewing documents, analyzing leaked information, and strategizing her next moves. She had faced criticism and scrutiny before, but this was different. This was not about fashion choices or public appearances. This was about her child, her family, and the very idea of legacy. And in a system as rigid and tradition-bound as the British monarchy, any challenge, however justified, could provoke backlash, retaliation, or isolation. And yet, despite the enormity of the revelations, Meghan remained determined. She was not one to be passive, to accept a narrative imposed upon her, or to allow her child's future to be dictated by others. Reports suggest that she began assembling her own network of allies, legal experts, and communication specialists, preparing for a confrontation that would test her endurance, intelligence, and resilience to the limit. Every decision was now a calculated step in a high-stakes game of strategy and survival. But here's the question that hung over everything. If Archie's legitimacy was being questioned, and if the king had taken steps to remove him from succession, what could Meghan and Harry possibly do to reclaim control? Could they challenge the king directly? Could they go public with evidence? Or was the monarchy's machinery too powerful, too entrenched, and too skilled at controlling the narrative for them to succeed? And then, just as the tension reached its peak, the first explosive leak hit the media. Tabloids published headlines that seemed almost designed to provoke outrage. Royal baby controversy. Archie's status in doubt. Meghan faces backlash over succession claim. Social media erupted. Memes, commentary, and speculation went viral. Suddenly, a private, deeply personal family matter had transformed into a global spectacle, scrutinized by millions who had no understanding of the subtleties, pressures, or dangers involved. For Meghan Markle, the stakes could not have been higher. Her child's future, her own legacy, and her relationship with the royal family were all on the line. And the question that loomed over every move she made, every decision she considered, and every statement she contemplated was this: could she reclaim the narrative before it was too late? Could she protect Archie, defend her family, and navigate a system designed to keep her under control? And just when the palace and public seemed to be closing in from every side, a revelation emerged that no one expected. Sources close to Meghan suggested that King Charles's decision might not have been as simple or straightforward as it appeared. There were indications of internal disputes, political maneuvering, and hidden agendas. Perhaps this wasn't just about Archie. Perhaps this was about sending a message to Meghan, Harry, and anyone who dared challenge the established order. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. She never expected a single envelope to carry so much power. Sitting alone in her Los Angeles home, Meghan Markle opened it with a mixture of curiosity and mild irritation. After all, in her life, unexpected communications were not unusual. But the contents of that envelope were anything but ordinary. Inside was a letter, marked with the official royal crest, bearing the unmistakable authority of Buckingham Palace. The words within were simple, concise, and brutally direct. Archie, her beloved son, was no longer recognized in the line of succession. Imagine, just for a moment, the emotional impact of receiving a message like that. One moment, you are a mother, proud and protective of your child, secure in your role and your child's future. The next, you are confronted with an assertion that shakes the foundation of your world. That your child's place, their existence in the royal hierarchy, and even their legitimacy, are being questioned by the very institution you married into. Meghan's mind raced. Was this a misunderstanding? A miscommunication? Or something far more calculated? A strategic maneuver to assert control over her, over Harry, and over their child? It's difficult to convey the intensity of emotions she must have felt in that moment. Shock, disbelief, rage, fear, all collided simultaneously. Meghan had faced public scrutiny before, of course. Headlines, paparazzi, and relentless social commentary had been constant companions throughout her life. But this was different. This was personal, intimate, and legally binding. This wasn't a rumor or a tabloid exaggeration. It was a formal, irrevocable decision from the head of the monarchy. The very institution that had promised to protect and support her family had now officially cast a shadow over her son. What made it even more devastating was the timing. Meghan had been working tirelessly to establish her post-royal identity, focusing on philanthropy, media projects, and her family's well-being. Yet, despite being thousands of miles away from the palace, she felt its shadow looming over her every move. Every email, every call, every report she received carried the implicit message: you are being watched, monitored, and judged. The letter confirmed what she had feared but had refused to confront directly. Archie's legitimacy, his place in the royal legacy, was under attack. How would any parent respond to that? Fear? Anger? Determination? Meghan reportedly felt all three at once. Her protective instincts surged to the forefront. She understood instinctively that ignoring this situation was not an option. But acting hastily could provoke further scrutiny, potentially backfire, and give her adversaries the leverage they sought. The palace was a minefield, and every step she took needed careful calculation. A single misstep could have consequences not just for her, but for Archie, for Harry, and for their entire family's future. Reports suggest that Meghan immediately reached out to her inner circle, trusted advisors, legal experts, and communication specialists. They convened in private, encrypted meetings, carefully reviewing every word of the letter, every possible interpretation, and every potential response. The conversations were intense, filled with emotional tension, strategic analysis, and, at times, bitter frustration. Every possible angle had to be considered: legal challenges, public statements, private negotiations, and media management. The emotional stakes were overwhelming. Meghan reportedly spent hours in contemplation, reflecting on the ramifications of King Charles's decision. How could someone, even the monarch, have the audacity to remove a child from the succession line without discussion, consultation, or warning? The emotional weight was compounded by the public dimension. Leaks, rumors, and speculation had already begun to circulate. Every friend, acquaintance, and member of the global media could now question Archie's legitimacy, and by extension, Meghan's capability as a mother. And then there was Prince Harry. While Meghan processed the letter, Harry's world was equally torn apart. He faced the impossible choice of supporting his wife while maintaining some semblance of loyalty to his father and the royal institution. Reports indicate that Harry spent sleepless nights trying to mediate, strategize, and understand the full extent of the palace's motivations. He was caught in a classic bind: personal loyalty versus institutional obligation. Every decision he made could ripple across his family, the monarchy, and public perception worldwide. The psychological toll of these revelations was immense. Meghan, always a woman of intelligence and strategic thinking, found herself navigating a labyrinth of intrigue, secrecy, and high stakes. The palace operates on centuries-old protocols, and questioning them is tantamount to rebellion. Meghan had challenged norms before, both in her career and her royal life, but nothing had prepared her for this level of scrutiny and institutional pressure. Meanwhile, the media sensed opportunity. The initial leaks hinted at a controversy so explosive it could dominate global headlines for weeks. Analysts speculated, social media erupted, and public opinion began to polarize. Some defended Meghan, citing her commitment to family and philanthropy, while others questioned her actions, her role, and even the legitimacy of Archie. Meghan had faced criticism before, but this was unprecedented. Her private anguish had become a public spectacle. Every gesture, statement, and social media post was scrutinized for hidden meaning, potential confirmation, or denial. What's particularly striking is the strategic timing of these leaks. Insiders claim that the palace had carefully orchestrated the narrative to test public reaction, gauge potential backlash, and shape the discourse before Meghan and Harry could respond. The palace is meticulous and disciplined, and every word, every document, every leak is part of a broader strategy. For Meghan, this meant she had to respond not only to the emotional blow, but to a calculated assault designed to undermine her credibility and authority. As Meghan absorbed the weight of the letter, her thoughts inevitably turned to her child. How could she protect Archie from this unprecedented threat? How could she shield him from public scrutiny, legal challenges, and the emotional ramifications of being removed from the line of succession? Reports suggest that Meghan considered every possible avenue, from private negotiations with senior royal advisors to public statements crafted for maximum impact and minimum risk. Every decision was a delicate balancing act, requiring intelligence, composure, and courage. And yet, there was another layer of complexity. The letter hinted at deeper, hidden motivations. Some insiders claimed that King Charles's decision was influenced not solely by concerns about succession, but by internal palace politics, family rivalries, and even personal perceptions of Meghan's behavior. The monarchy, it seemed, had long been preparing for a confrontation, and Meghan's prominence, assertiveness, and willingness to challenge norms made her an unavoidable target. The letter was the culmination of a strategy decades in the making, and Meghan now had to respond on a battlefield she had not fully anticipated. The weight of secrecy, strategy, and survival became paramount. Meghan reportedly began drafting contingency plans, consulting experts, and reviewing historical precedents for similar conflicts within royal history. Every word of advice had to be weighed carefully. A single misstep could be used against her, a single public statement could ignite a media frenzy, and a single perceived act of defiance could escalate tensions beyond repair. And yet, amidst the turmoil, Meghan demonstrated remarkable composure. Her focus shifted from panic to strategy. She understood that the only way to protect her child, defend her family, and maintain her own integrity was to act decisively, intelligently, and creatively. Reports indicate that she began forming alliances with trusted advisors, media consultants, and legal experts, preparing for a confrontation that could redefine her relationship with the monarchy and reshape public perception forever. But even as Meghan strategized, there was no denying the personal pain. She had married into a family steeped in tradition, ceremony, and legacy. She had hoped to navigate that world with grace, intelligence, and purpose. Yet now, she faced a reality where her child's very existence in the royal hierarchy was questioned, where loyalty was fragile, and where betrayal could come from unexpected quarters. The emotional toll was immense. And as if the pressure wasn't enough, rumors began circulating that senior advisors were debating the legal ramifications of the king's decision, considering how to implement it quietly, and planning contingencies for any potential backlash. Meghan and Harry were being pushed to act quickly, decisively, and with precision. The clock was ticking, the stakes were monumental, and the world was watching. So what did Meghan do next? How did she respond to a revelation that no parent should ever have to face? How did she navigate the treacherous waters of royal politics while safeguarding her child and her own dignity? Reports suggest that the actions she took were bold, unprecedented, and strategic, setting the stage for a confrontation that would reverberate throughout the monarchy and the media alike. But what came next would escalate the situation even further, and no one saw it coming. One signature, one decision, one moment that would echo through the halls of Buckingham Palace, across the globe, and into the lives of millions who followed the royal family. King Charles III, after months of deliberation, consultation, and internal debate, made a decision that no one anticipated. Archie Harrison, Meghan Markle, and Prince Harry's firstborn son would be removed from the line of succession forever. The moment the decree was finalized, it was both procedural and devastating. Procedural because the king, as head of the monarchy, has the authority to make such decisions. Devastating because of its unprecedented nature. Never before had a living, acknowledged grandchild been stripped of succession rights, and certainly never had it been executed in such a direct, formal, and irrevocable manner. The palace, with its centuries of tradition and careful protocols, had crossed into uncharted territory. Imagine the weight of that moment. For Meghan, the mother, it was an emotional earthquake. For Harry, the father, it was a moral and familial dilemma of staggering proportions. And for King Charles, it was a calculated assertion of authority, a move to assert control over an increasingly independent and, in his eyes, unpredictable branch of the royal family. This was not merely a legal action. It was a message, a warning, and, for those in the inner circle, a demonstration of absolute power. But why would King Charles take such a drastic step? The answer is layered, complex, and controversial. On one hand, there were whispers of loyalty and tradition. The monarchy, as an institution, values order, predictability, and adherence to centuries-old norms. Any disruption, especially one involving heirs, is viewed not just as personal disobedience, but as a threat to the continuity and integrity of the crown. From this perspective, Archie's removal was about safeguarding the monarchy, preserving stability, and ensuring that precedent remained intact. Yet, there is another, more personal layer. Some palace insiders suggest that the king's decision was motivated, at least in part, by a desire to assert authority over Meghan and Harry. Their unprecedented actions, public statements, interviews, media deals, and challenges to royal protocol had disrupted the carefully controlled narrative of the monarchy. To Charles, it may have appeared that the couple had overstepped boundaries, ignored tradition, and, by extension, threatened the reputation of the institution. The removal of Archie, then, became both a strategic and symbolic act. The process itself was meticulous. Advisors were consulted, legal ramifications were evaluated, and communication strategies were developed. Every word of the decree, every clause, and every formal phrasing was scrutinized to ensure it could withstand public and legal scrutiny. This was not a snap decision. It was calculated, deliberate, and executed with precision. And yet, even with all the planning, the decision carried enormous risks. Public backlash was inevitable. Media scrutiny was guaranteed. And the emotional fallout for Meghan, Harry, and their supporters was impossible to contain. Inside the palace, tension ran high. Senior staff members reportedly debated the optics of the decision for days. Could the public understand? Would there be sympathy for the monarchy or outrage at what could be perceived as cruelty? Every scenario was analyzed, from global media coverage to social media trends, to anticipate and mitigate potential damage. Even minor advisors weighed in on the matter, knowing that a single misstep could escalate into an uncontrollable storm. Meanwhile, Meghan and Harry were kept in the dark for as long as possible. Protocol dictated that direct communication with the king's family members regarding such matters was limited, filtered, and highly controlled. When news eventually reached them, it came through channels that were carefully orchestrated to manage timing, narrative, and impact. But the secrecy only heightened the shock, anger, and sense of betrayal. Meghan reportedly felt blindsided, disregarded, and violated. The emotional stakes were unprecedented. For Meghan, this was not just a question of succession. It was a question of legitimacy, maternal authority, and the protection of her child. Every instinct screamed to confront the king directly, demand explanations, and reclaim her child's status. But confronting the head of the monarchy is not a trivial matter. The stakes were immense, and the potential consequences of misjudgment could be catastrophic: public humiliation, legal threats, and irreversible damage to family relationships. Prince Harry, too, faced an impossible situation. He had sworn loyalty to his father, and yet his love and commitment to Meghan and Archie were absolute. How does a man navigate this kind of moral, emotional, and familial minefield? Reports indicate that he engaged in hours of private consultation, weighing every possible response. Should they negotiate quietly, seek legal counsel, or go public with the news? Each choice carried risks not just for them, but for the monarchy itself. The timing of the decision added an additional layer of complexity. It came at a moment when Meghan was highly visible in the media, promoting philanthropic initiatives and engaging with the public on issues of global concern. Any reaction from her, any public statement, would inevitably intersect with media narratives already in motion. The palace, aware of this, strategically planned the timing to minimize immediate backlash while maximizing long-term control of the narrative. But even the most careful planning could not account for the unpredictability of human emotion. Meghan's response, according to insider reports, was immediate and intense. The shock and indignation she felt fueled a determination to act, strategize, and reclaim agency in a situation designed to render her powerless. This was not simply a reaction. It was the beginning of a calculated counter-strategy. And then there was the public dimension. Social media, tabloids, and global news networks exploded within hours of the news leaking. Headlines varied from sensationalist conjecture to measured reporting, but all carried the same underlying implication. The monarchy had taken an unprecedented step, and Meghan Markle and her family were at the center of it. Memes, commentary, and opinion pieces flooded platforms worldwide. The emotional intensity was palpable, and the stakes for public perception could not have been higher. The king's decision, while legally defensible, had immediate consequences for perception, reputation, and family dynamics. Allies within the palace expressed concern about the optics, acknowledging that even loyalists could perceive the action as draconian, cruel, or vindictive. Critics, of course, seized upon the opportunity to frame the decision as emblematic of royal hypocrisy, coldness, and authoritarianism. Meghan's supporters, meanwhile, rallied in defense, emphasizing maternal protection, fairness, and justice. Amidst all of this, the emotional pressure on Meghan and Harry was immense. Meghan reportedly spent hours in solitude, processing the enormity of the situation, evaluating possible responses, and considering the ramifications for her child's future. The decision was not merely a legal or procedural matter. It was an existential threat to Archie's place in history, the family's cohesion, and Meghan's own sense of justice. And yet, even as Meghan strategized, King Charles continued his deliberations behind closed doors. Sources indicate that he was fully aware of the potential backlash, but remained resolute. To him, the decision was necessary, justifiable, and, in his view, in the best interest of the monarchy. It was a calculated risk, one that prioritized tradition, hierarchy, and institutional control over individual emotion and sentiment. But the ripple effects were just beginning. Advisors warned of potential leaks, public criticism, and long-term consequences for family relations. The decree, while legally binding, had unleashed a storm that no one could fully control. The palace hierarchy was rigid, but even within the walls of Buckingham Palace, uncertainty, tension, and fear spread quickly. And so, Meghan and Harry were left with a choice: accept the decree quietly, risk losing their child's standing, and hope that public attention would dissipate, or confront the decision head-on, exposing the tensions, questioning authority, and potentially igniting a global media firestorm. Every advisor, every ally, every strategist emphasized caution. But Meghan, known for her resilience, intelligence, and assertiveness, knew that inaction was not an option. And just when the tension reached a crescendo, an unexpected twist emerged. Insider reports revealed that the decision, while appearing straightforward, was riddled with ambiguity. The decree itself contained wording that hinted at potential legal loopholes, interpretations, and future challenges. It was as if the king had issued a warning, but left the door open for contestation. A subtle acknowledgement that even absolute authority can be challenged when confronted by determination, intelligence, and strategy. But what came next would escalate the drama even further, and no one saw it coming. The moment King Charles's decree became known, quietly, subtly, through channels meant to contain it, the world reacted with the speed and ferocity only modern media can deliver. Within hours, news outlets across the globe were ablaze with speculation. Headlines screamed, "Royal family turmoil, Archie's succession status in doubt, monarchy shock, Meghan faces backlash over heir controversy, and Archie removed from line of succession." Social media exploded, with Twitter threads, Instagram stories, and TikTok videos dissecting every possible angle, rumor, and whisper. It wasn't just news, it was a full-blown media storm. Imagine the sensation of seeing your private family crisis transformed into a global spectacle in mere hours. Meghan Markle, thousands of miles away in Los Angeles, suddenly faced a barrage of public scrutiny she had neither invited nor anticipated. Every headline carried implications, judgments, and assumptions about her, Harry, and Archie. The world watched as the private became public, the intimate became viral, and a personal crisis transformed into a spectacle of global curiosity. The palace, of course, had long mastered the art of media management. Historically, leaks were deliberate, calculated, and timed to maintain control over the narrative. But in this case, the leak, or what some suggest was a controlled leak, had triggered something the monarchy might not have fully anticipated: the uncontrollable, chaotic power of modern social media. Memes proliferated overnight, celebrity commentators weighed in, and countless conspiracy theories spread faster than anyone could contain. Each day brought a new wave of rumors, accusations, and sensationalized reporting. For Meghan, the emotional stakes were enormous. Not only was Archie's position under threat, but her own reputation as a mother and as a royal figure was being questioned in real time across millions of screens worldwide. The media storm wasn't just frustrating. It was deeply personal. Every image of her smiling with Archie, every philanthropic post, and every interview became fodder for analysis, speculation, and sometimes mockery. The scrutiny was relentless, invasive, and at times cruel. The media storm also amplified existing tensions within the royal family. Senior palace officials reportedly struggled to manage the narrative, knowing that every public reaction, every tweet, and every article could affect public perception, royal credibility, and even diplomatic relationships. Advisors debated whether to issue statements, control further leaks, or remain silent. Each choice had profound consequences. Staying silent risked appearing indifferent or uncaring. Issuing statements risked escalating the controversy and validating rumors. Meanwhile, Meghan and Harry were forced to navigate this storm with caution, intelligence, and strategy. Reports suggest that Meghan, with her team of advisors, began to carefully track every mention of her family in the media, analyze public sentiment, and identify key narratives that could be leveraged or countered. Harry, balancing loyalty to his father and protection of his family, engaged in private conversations, strategy sessions, and legal consultations. Together, they were plotting a response that would not only protect Archie, but reclaim control over a narrative that had spun wildly out of their hands. And the public reaction was unlike anything the royal family had faced before. Social media platforms were inundated with commentary, divided along lines of loyalty, criticism, and speculation. Fans of the Sussexes rallied in support of Meghan and Harry, framing the king's decision as a cold and calculated act of authority. Critics, meanwhile, interpreted the move as necessary, even overdue, suggesting that Meghan had overstepped traditional royal boundaries. The polarization of opinion created an unprecedented global conversation about family, loyalty, and the evolving role of the monarchy in the 21st century. Within this media maelstrom, rumors and misinformation spread almost as quickly as verified reports. False claims about Archie's status, Meghan's intentions, and Harry's reactions circulated widely. Some speculated that Archie had never been intended to be recognized formally in the succession line. Others claimed secret palace memos suggested disputes over the legitimacy of Meghan's marriage, funding, or media contracts. The media storm was a double-edged sword. It amplified Meghan's plight, but it also created a fog of misinformation that complicated any response she might mount. For Meghan, the challenge was immense. Every response had to be carefully calibrated to avoid escalation while addressing both the personal and public dimensions of the crisis. Reports indicate that she considered multiple avenues: discreet communications with palace officials, strategic public statements, private media engagements, and legal consultations. Every move was calculated to maintain dignity, protect Archie, and assert control over a narrative that had been hijacked by speculation and rumor. But what made this media storm particularly potent was the element of unpredictability. Unlike the controlled media environment Meghan had navigated as a royal, social media introduced a chaotic, almost anarchic variable. Every celebrity comment, every viral meme, and every influencer opinion contributed to a rapidly evolving narrative that could not be fully contained. Meghan had to respond not only to traditional media, but to this sprawling, decentralized ecosystem of voices, each with its own reach and influence. Adding fuel to the fire were the palace insiders who, intentionally or inadvertently, contributed to the narrative. Hints of leaks, unofficial comments, and anonymous briefings created an environment where rumors and fact were indistinguishable. Analysts noted that the palace might have underestimated the speed and virality of information in the modern media landscape. Even a carefully crafted statement could be distorted, misinterpreted, or taken out of context, further intensifying the crisis. The emotional toll on Meghan was profound. Her private anguish, compounded by public scrutiny, created an environment of constant stress, anxiety, and pressure. Friends and confidants described her as vigilant, cautious, and intensely strategic. Every interaction, public appearance, and communication was scrutinized not only by the media, but also by palace insiders, legal experts, and the global audience. Meghan's resilience was tested as never before. Meanwhile, Harry confronted his own challenges. Torn between loyalty to his father and commitment to his family, he found himself navigating a minefield of institutional expectations, public opinion, and personal responsibility. Sources suggest he engaged in private negotiations with palace officials, seeking a path that could preserve family unity while protecting Meghan and Archie. Yet, each step was fraught with risk. Any perceived miscalculation could exacerbate the media storm and intensify scrutiny. The media storm also had global consequences. International news outlets picked up the story, framing it in ways that reflected local cultural expectations and political climates. In the United States, commentators emphasized themes of personal freedom, maternal protection, and media scrutiny. In the United Kingdom, discussions focused on royal tradition, hierarchy, and protocol. The global reach of the story ensured that Meghan and Harry's challenge was no longer a family matter. It had become an international spectacle. And amidst this chaos, Meghan reportedly remained focused, strategic, and deliberate. She engaged with her advisors to track public sentiment, assess media coverage, and prepare potential responses. She reviewed legal avenues, considered public statements, and planned strategic engagements that could influence both the narrative and public perception. Her approach was methodical, balancing emotional intensity with calculated decision-making. Yet, even with careful planning, the unpredictability of the media storm remained a constant threat. Each day brought new headlines, new social media speculation, and new pressure from multiple directions. Meghan faced the dual challenge of protecting Archie and maintaining her own composure in a situation designed to provoke, manipulate, and destabilize. And then, in the midst of this swirling chaos, an insider leak hit that no one expected. Documents surfaced suggesting that the king's decision was not solely about Archie's succession, but was influenced by internal palace politics, strategic considerations, and a desire to assert authority over Meghan and Harry's independent actions. The revelation added a new layer of intrigue, suggesting that Archie's status was a pawn in a larger, more complex game of power, control, and familial dynamics. But what came next would take the media storm to an entirely new level. And no one could predict the global consequences. Not everyone in Meghan's inner circle was on her side. That is the bitter truth that few outside the royal family could fully comprehend. While Meghan Markle had surrounded herself with trusted advisors, aides, and friends, the palace, and the relentless pressures of public scrutiny, had a way of seeding doubt, fostering disloyalty, and turning even the closest allies into instruments of intrigue. It was in this high-stakes, tension-filled environment that Meghan had to navigate not just her own strategy, but the hidden agendas of those who claimed loyalty. Imagine the complexity. On one hand, you have advisors whose expertise and counsel you rely upon to defend your child, your legacy, and your reputation. On the other, whispers of betrayal, deliberate leaks, and hidden motives lurk just beneath the surface. Meghan reportedly found herself questioning every conversation, every recommendation, every email, and every strategic suggestion. The stakes were enormous. A single misstep could empower King Charles's decision, jeopardize Archie's status, or amplify the media storm. The first cracks began appearing when Meghan received subtle hints from multiple sources. One trusted aide, someone she had worked closely with for years, suddenly seemed distant, hesitant, and unusually cautious. Meetings that had once been straightforward became labyrinthine, filled with pauses, vague language, and unspoken tension. Meghan, known for her keen observation and strategic mind, sensed immediately that not all was as it seemed. Could this person still be trusted? Or had the palace succeeded in infiltrating her inner circle, placing doubt and fear where certainty once stood? Meanwhile, another advisor, reportedly responsible for media strategy, began presenting risk assessments that seemed overly cautious, or perhaps deliberately designed to restrain Meghan's ability to act decisively. She noticed patterns, recommendations that slowed her response, subtle suggestions that emphasized compliance over assertion, and an undercurrent of caution that felt more like manipulation than advice. In the high-pressure environment Meghan was facing, even minor delays could have profound consequences. The betrayals were subtle but significant. In one instance, confidential discussions about potential legal action to challenge Archie's removal were leaked to media outlets within hours. Although no one could confirm the source, insiders suggested that someone within Meghan's trusted circle had shared information, whether intentionally or inadvertently, with palace-affiliated channels. The result was immediate. Headlines speculated on Meghan's motives, her strategy, and even her personal character, adding another layer of public scrutiny. This environment of suspicion forced Meghan to adapt quickly. She began implementing strict measures to control communications within her inner circle, introducing encryption, secure messaging platforms, and compartmentalization of sensitive discussions. Only the most trusted advisors were allowed access to critical information, and every step was monitored for potential leaks or breaches of trust. The stakes were no longer simply about public perception. They were about operational security, strategy, and survival in a landscape where even allies could be compromised. Amidst this tension, a few loyal allies emerged, providing critical support, counsel, and reassurance. These individuals, carefully selected for their discretion, expertise, and loyalty, became Meghan's primary source of guidance and stability. They helped her navigate legal strategy, media engagement, and public messaging. They also provided emotional support during moments of intense stress, allowing her to maintain composure and clarity when decisions had global implications. But loyalty in the royal context is never straightforward. Meghan quickly learned that even those closest to her were subject to pressure, coercion, and influence from palace channels. Some advisors, while personally supportive, had careers, reputations, or personal stakes that could be compromised if they acted too aggressively on Meghan's behalf. This created a delicate balancing act, advocating for Archie and her family while protecting the careers and interests of those around her. Every decision was calculated, every trust evaluated, and every action carefully measured. Meanwhile, Meghan's family dynamics added additional complexity. Even within her own household, differences in perspective, approach, and temperament influenced decision-making. Prince Harry, despite his unwavering commitment to her and Archie, sometimes differed on strategy, public messaging, and engagement with media channels. Their private conversations, reportedly intense and emotionally charged, revolved around difficult questions. When to go public? How to challenge the king? Could legal action succeed without irreparable damage? Each decision carried weight, with consequences that extended far beyond personal considerations. Adding to the intrigue were anonymous palace insiders who seemed determined to influence Meghan's inner circle. Leaks hinted at strategic manipulation, pushing certain narratives, amplifying doubts, and testing responses to gauge her next moves. These manipulations were subtle yet effective, designed to sow uncertainty and hesitation at critical moments. Meghan, with her characteristic vigilance, began developing countermeasures to detect and neutralize such interference. But the psychological pressure was relentless. The emotional stakes were immense. Meghan reportedly experienced waves of anxiety, anger, and frustration, balanced by periods of clarity, determination, and strategic insight. Every interaction within her inner circle became an exercise in discernment. Who could be trusted implicitly, who required verification, and who might be influenced by palace pressure. In an environment where loyalty was constantly tested, Meghan had to maintain sharp intuition, strategic foresight, and emotional resilience simultaneously. And then there was the question of timing. Every leak, every rumor, every palace maneuver was carefully timed to maximize pressure on Meghan. The palace seemed to understand the rhythms of media cycles, social attention, and global interest, orchestrating revelations to coincide with moments when public scrutiny would be most intense. Meghan and her advisors had to anticipate these moves, respond strategically, and maintain the initiative despite being forced onto a defensive footing. Reports suggest that Meghan responded to these pressures with a combination of caution and assertiveness. She compartmentalized information, reinforced loyalty among key advisors, and developed contingency plans for every possible scenario. Each action was designed not only to protect Archie's status, but also to assert control over a narrative increasingly dominated by palace maneuvers, leaks, and speculation. Yet, even with careful strategy, the psychological toll was extraordinary. Meghan had to navigate betrayal, suspicion, and manipulation while maintaining the appearance of composure in public. Every interview, every appearance, and every social media post was evaluated for potential impact, and the pressure to respond effectively was constant. This was not simply a family dispute. It was a high-stakes game of strategy, reputation management, and survival under the relentless glare of global attention. Amid these challenges, Meghan's inner circle became both a source of strength and a potential vulnerability. The right allies could amplify her voice, protect her interests, and provide critical insight. The wrong allies, intentionally or not, could leak information, misrepresent her intentions, or inadvertently empower palace maneuvers. Meghan's ability to discern loyalty, influence strategy, and anticipate interference became essential to navigating this unprecedented crisis. As the drama unfolded, Meghan reportedly realized that the removal of Archie from the succession line was about far more than protocol or tradition. It was a power play, a test of resilience, and a warning. The palace was sending a clear message. The Sussexes could be challenged, their actions constrained, and their influence limited if they did not adhere to established expectations. Meghan's response, therefore, needed to be decisive, intelligent, and strategic. But even as she plotted her next moves, Meghan knew that the palace was watching. Every leak, every subtle manipulation, and every carefully timed message was designed to provoke a reaction, gauge her response, and potentially shape public perception against her. In this environment, she had to act with precision, anticipating every possible countermove while maintaining composure, credibility, and strategic advantage. And then, in the midst of this high-stakes chess game, a shocking revelation emerged from within her inner circle. Someone she trusted implicitly had reportedly shared sensitive information with palace-affiliated channels, providing details about Meghan's intended strategies before they could be executed. The betrayal cut deep. It was a stark reminder that even the closest allies could be compromised, and that in the world of royal politics, trust was both essential and precarious. This moment forced Meghan to adapt, innovate, and tighten her inner circle further. She implemented additional security measures, refined her strategy, and prepared contingency plans for every eventuality. It was a lesson in vigilance, resilience, and the harsh realities of navigating a system designed to test even the most intelligent and capable individuals. But what came next would test Meghan's resolve, her strategy, and her ability to protect her family in ways no one could anticipate. And it would set the stage for a confrontation that would shock the world. The moment the whispers began about Archie's legitimacy, Meghan Markle knew one thing. The conversation would inevitably turn to DNA. And in the world of royalty, where lineage is not just personal but constitutional, DNA is the ultimate arbiter of truth. But what Meghan faced was not a straightforward question of biology. It was a tangled web of palace politics, media speculation, and deliberate misinformation designed to destabilize her, Harry, and her child. Imagine for a moment, your child's very identity is being questioned publicly and privately, and the supposed proof lies in documents and claims you've never had the chance to examine. The palace had been meticulous in its strategy, circulating innuendos about DNA tests, confidential memos, and leaked commentary that suggested doubts about Archie's status. Every rumor, every suggestion, and every hint was designed to plant seeds of uncertainty, not just in the public's mind, but in Meghan's own circle of confidence. Meghan reportedly faced hours of agonizing deliberation over how to respond. Could she counter the claims openly? Could she demand transparency or challenge the monarchy directly? Every potential move carried enormous risk. A single misstep could be interpreted as guilt, while silence could be taken as acquiescence. She understood that in the high-stakes world of royal succession, perception was as critical as reality. The court of public opinion, amplified by modern media, could be more decisive than any legal ruling or decree.